So I've had some time after Apple's event. It's been nearly a week at this point, and I've had a lot to think about, especially during my long flights and long drives and long boat rides. There's been a lot of traveling going on, and it's got me starting to connect all of the dots surrounding Apple Vision Pro and why I think it's actually Tim Cook's true iPhone moment and what it might mean for the future of the Apple ecosystem. Let's begin. So what actually opened my mind a lot to the idea of Vision OS is seeing Tim Cook talk about it on Good Morning America. Yes, he talked a lot about it at the Apple event, of course, but I also started realizing that in those side interviews, he started mentioning this can do everything your iPhone and Mac can and more. And you know, it's interesting. This is the first product category in Tim Cook's legacy that is completely independent. It doesn't require a Mac, an iPhone, or any other Apple product, really, which can't be said about his previous products that he's introduced to the lineup, which are still a huge deal, and they've left a big impact. The first one I would say being the Apple Watch, and then after that AirPods, and then AirTags. The HomePod is in there as well. They're all decent Apple products, but they're all dependent on different sections of the ecosystem, and at the end of the day, a lot of them are all pointing towards the iPhone. They all come back to the Apple Watch enhances the iPhone experience, or AirPods make the iPhone experience better. AirTags help you track down other items through your iPhone, right? It's all about selling you more and more on the iPhone, whereas Apple Vision Pro, in all of the demos and all of the showcases for it, none of it is really pointing towards this helps your iPhone become X, or this makes your iPhone better at this or that. No, this, in my opinion, is kind of Tim's way of saying we're going to replace the touchscreen in many ways. And what Polymatter has talked about in really old videos, but I still think they hold up, is the idea that what is Apple's focus on perpetually? Like way back in the Steve Jobs era as well, and what has stayed consistent through the years, Apple is always constantly looking for products or innovations that are going to kill their best-selling product. So when the Mac was first getting popular, what's going to kill the Mac? What can we make that comes out on the market so that we kill off our best-selling product rather than another competitor? And that's when the iBooks and the MacBooks started entering the picture. Okay, we're going to have mobile computing, computers that you can take with you. That's the threat to the desktop Mac. And then, okay, now we got more into the portable space. We're seeing a lot of desire for music with iTunes. Let's find out what's going to kill laptops. So they get into the pocketable computer space with the iPod. And then after that, what's going to kill the iPod? Probably smartphones getting more iPod-like functionality, so they make the iPhone. And that one's stuck for quite some time now. It's been like 16 years of iPhone, and there really hasn't been anything on the market that comes close to what we could really deem an iPhone killer. So I think, not so secretly, but Apple has been behind the scenes, as we've known for a while, with their LiDAR scanners and all of the AR demos that they showcase whenever they announce an event. And even in previous interviews, Tim Cook has been pretty clear that they're very interested and excited for AR technologies. I think that's because from the beginning, Tim's thesis is that augmented reality technology is what the biggest threat is to the iPhone. And what I loved about the pitch of Apple Vision Pro isn't so much that we're going to live in this virtual world, not like Ready Player One or the metaverse, like what Mark Zuckerberg's been pushing of like, we're going to make this virtual environment where we're all these weird looking Pixar characters and we're going to live in that world and not this one. Apple Vision Pro and Vision OS is all focused on spatial computing. So you're using your digital apps and you're managing your real life, but in an augmented space. There's an option to completely shut off the entire world if you want to with that digital crown, but that definitely didn't seem like the default to me. In my opinion, the way they were pitching it in the event is this is not necessarily a gaming device, and this is not really meant to transport you to another virtual environment, although yeah, it can if you want it to, but the intended purpose of the product is to more immerse you in your computing of the real world. That's why there's such an emphasis on showcasing how you look from the outside with this headset, even though yes, it looks a little bit goofy, and yes, I laughed quite a bit at the event, but you know how there's a lot of people that will immediately defend anything Apple releases by saying, well, you know, the iPhone was expensive at first, or, well, you know, the Mac was expensive at first and then it came down in price over time. You gotta give it time, okay? You gotta let it settle in before it actually starts to become a success. Well, I want to say the same thing about people's reactions, and this includes my own. It takes time for the public, and it takes time for people to really sit on a topic, think about the potentials of a new product or technology, and really let it sink in before they realize, okay, what does this enable us to do? what can this unlock? What can this open up in terms of my use? So yeah, I'm gonna react on this channel the way I'm feeling at any given moment. And during that event last week, I thought it was really funny to have this display showcasing your eyes strapped to your face. And yeah, it looked kind of goofy. And $3,500 hurt my heart. Like, that was painful when they unveiled it. So I'm showing you how I feel at that given moment. And YouTube will always document, here's when this was live or here's when this video was uploaded, so you can see how I felt in that point in time. But I'm not too focused on this channel about trying to be the ultimate guesser, like the guy who perfectly predicted anything, because I don't think that strategy in YouTube ever pays off. Like, I predicted this would be a success, or I predicted this would be a failure. Yeah, no one cares what you predicted, okay? You didn't really know. Maybe you guessed correctly occasionally, but you're just gonna not bring up the times you were wrong anyway, and I think it's human to be wrong. I think it's kind of fun for Apple to try to show us how wrong we may be on something. So that doesn't mean we should blindly believe anything Apple says. I'm not trying to make a video claiming that Apple Vision Pro is going to replace the smartphone. The truth is, I don't know. The more I think about all the screens we have in our lives, right? We've got phones, we've got laptops, we've got watches, and we got TVs. The more I realize that Vision Pro is closer probably than any other product out there at replacing all of those things. So yes, there's limitations, of course, with the battery life, and the aesthetics of it make it hard to be something you could wear regularly or as passively as, say, an Apple Watch or even AirPods. But with the right hand gestures, they're saying we don't need to box our spatial computing into this small 5 to 6 inch display that fits in our pockets. If we're wearing something that immerses us still in the real world, but it just so happens to enable us to put windows, put our apps, or put our most common use cases surrounding us, and that's why they're even pitching this thing as a camera, you know, with spatial video. While I think that's gonna be tricky socially to accept, like wearing a headset and trying to record videos of what's going on, I still gotta admit, I think Apple's genuinely trying here with Vision OS to replace the smartphone. Like, it's not gonna happen overnight, and because it's so expensive, I still think this could take decades before it actually does, but I think that's the intention of it, which, regardless of the outcome, whether or not they actually do replace the smartphone, I find this a fascinating strategy for Apple's product lineup. They're still focused on what is going to kill our best-selling product, and that means there's a lot of money and a lot of hardcore engineering going towards this device, and yes, it's far more expensive than an iPhone, but I think in Tim's head at least, this is not meant to replace just one $1,000 purchase in your life. I think in Apple's mind, maybe this would have been a better pitch marketing-wise. Don't compare it to, you know, a VR motion tracking system and a state-of-the-art, you know, home theater system. I would say if this is the last display you need to buy, like, this could replace the smartphone, this could replace the TV in your house, and this could replace your laptop. And now, when you're traveling, like I am, if you want to edit on the go or get some work done, then okay, you pull out your keyboard and trackpad. That's why I said earlier, I don't think its goal is to replace, you know, your Mac user input, but it could replace the touchscreen because you can rely on a keyboard and mouse to run your desktop screens that are floating around you. But then when you want to do something on a smartphone, you can browse through hand tracking and scrolling just with your fingers, and you can pinch to zoom that way. It's got those downward facing cameras. It can track your hands really accurately. I think the better pitch would have been this replaces like your entire ecosystem, essentially. It's got the M2 chip in there, so we know it's capable of running macOS if we really wanted it to. Oh god, I've wanted macOS on the iPad all along. Now I'm gonna be ranting about why Vision OS should let you run macOS, but at least you can AirPlay from your Mac to the screen. They demoed that already, but I'm sure with time more and more apps will run natively and they won't have to be casted from your MacBook display. But yeah, I think the use cases have really kind of opened up in my head with time, like especially because I've been waiting around the past week at airports a lot, or on boats, or on planes, and sometimes you're checking something out or you're watching a video or getting some work done and you're kind of paranoid about, can people around me see what I'm working on? Can other people see this screen? And Apple has this big emphasis on like personal privacy, right? That's why they go that extra mile to make sure no one can see your data, no one can see what you're working on. For the same reason that like when you type in a password, you see dots, right? Because you don't want someone being able to read your password just looking over your shoulder. I think Apple might be enhancing that to the Vision Pro experience of, hey, now if you're browsing something on your phone or writing an email or watching a movie, no one around you has to really know exactly what you're doing. And I think the big dilemma with this whole adoption is, of course, it's a screen that only you can see. And there's challenges with that for sure, but Apple has a very, very good track record of normalizing a lot of technologies, like multi-touch on the original iPhone. It was this big screen with not very many buttons, and I remember when it came out, a lot of people thought that was crazy to not have physical buttons, but they normalized it, and now we don't even think about it. Same thing with the Apple Watch, same thing with AirPods. Everyone memed those to death when they came out, like you got these stems hanging out of your ears. Oh, you're gonna lose them when they fall out. Oh, that's terrible. Apple thought of use cases for it, and Apple thought this is what the future is gonna be, and it ended up happening. Now, just because Apple's had a great track record with normalizing technology before, it doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna do it this time, right? I'm not trying to claim I know what the future has in store, but I'm definitely starting to see how Tim Cook's career and legacy is all starting to come to this singular point. Like, he worked really, really hard at making the iPhone experience as best as possible, but now with the push towards foldables, people are like, yeah, we like our phones, but we're so limited by how big the screen is in our pockets. So do we need to fold the display in half so that we can have like an 8.3-inch display that fits in our pocket and we spend $2,000 on that? Or do we want an infinitely large display that can, wrap around our entire vision for $3,500? Or maybe Apple Vision Air can get it down to $2,000. It's going to take time, and I think the market and how it responds to Apple Vision Pro is going to dictate what Apple does moving forward. But if they do normalize it and get to the point where we're at right now, where lots of us and our partners and our family members all have iPhones or Apple Watches or AirPods, and if we all have it, then I think you'll be able to kind of share screens with selected contacts or show people that you trust the same screens that you're looking at. Those same screens can show up on their headset as well. That way you can watch a movie together or write an email together collaboratively and that kind of thing. So with the proper time and the proper social acceptance of the technology, I do start to question how useful the iPhone would be if you could have an infinitely large screen with you perpetually all the time, right? Like, the downsides, of course, would be the battery life is not as good as the iPhone, and the cameras, sure, they're mounted to your face, but that's not going to replace, just like taking a selfie with a few people or be able to do what I'm doing right now, mount my phone on a tripod and point it at me as a camera. That's not going to be as easily done with Vision Pro, but maybe this is all the more reason that the iPhone is becoming more and more of a camera system, is because Apple's realizing that the future of spatial computing might primarily be through augmented reality, and that our phones aren't really phones anymore. They just kind of become camera systems to access those angles or those perspectives or those lenses that the headset can't quite handle because of its weight, expense, or just the mounting mechanism in place. I've been saying from the beginning, I always wanted Apple to make their own dedicated camera, right? Like, if they had bigger sensors and manual lenses you could attach, I think you would have far better performance than any other DSLR and definitely better than the iPhone. Maybe that's what the iPhone will slowly turn into. I don't think it will die per se, but I think it will start to become more and more, as it already is, a camera-focused device, and then a display is secondary. But for managing email, keeping up with friends, texting, and getting directions, all that general quality of life stuff, with proper time and the right efficiency, I do think Apple Vision Pro could get there. And it's perfect for Tim Cook's career because he came to Apple and came to Steve Jobs as the supply chain guy. He was the one who found a way to streamline and figure out complex supply chains for all of Steve's crazy ideas. He had all of these radical and innovative approaches to what a Mac should be, what it should do, and what it should look like. And Tim Cook knew how to manage the supply chain. And I think that's one of the biggest dilemmas preventing an augmented reality experience from replacing the smartphone is the tech. The battery life, the efficiency, how good is the hand tracking, how long can you wear it without your eyes getting fatigued. They need good engineering, and they need a great supply chain that is capable of producing tons of super high-powered and super efficient chips, and also these new innovative micro OLED displays. Tim has the supply chain expertise to make that hardware scalable and possible. Even though, yes, they're starting with a very niche market and it's only going to be in the United States, this is like Tim Cook's final act, in my opinion. He said he wanted to oversee one last product before he retired. I understand why it's this one, because it kind of complements and unifies everything that Apple has worked towards with their existing ecosystem. It kind of all comes back to this. Him figuring out the supply chain and him trying to figure out what's going to kill the iPhone. And like I said, it's not going to happen overnight. I don't even think by the 4th or 5th generation this is going to be ready to replace our phones, but I do think more and more of the use cases of our phones could be replaced with them in time as they get more fashionable, as it gets smaller, sleeker, more affordable, and they may fail. I'm just saying that from the beginning. It may not work out, but in Apple's mind, I think they're okay with that that risk because, okay, if it doesn't replace the smartphone, then big whoop. We convinced a bunch of our hardcore fans to drop thousands of dollars on this tech for some augmented niche of the market for people that want to have like infinite, external monitors at their mobile desk setup, right? So no harm, no foul. If it doesn't replace the iPhone, it's still kind of a cool product that complements the ecosystem in its own unique way. Probably good for people that live alone or are traveling a lot. But if it ends up being more than that, then Apple may have just permanently changed the future of how we use technology because of this hand tracking and how low latency they're trying to make the experience so that you can just kind of put it on and go about your daily life. And I think this unveil and how they pitched Vision OS has really kind of shown me how Apple is not trying to immerse us in some different world. They're trying to actually fully more immerse us in the existing one. The creepy part about that is just that we wouldn't actually be looking at the world. We're just looking at a display of the world. But I think in a lot of ways, we're kind of already doing that with how much time we spend on our phones and how we maintain friendships and relationships virtually a lot of the time now anyway. So maybe strapping a display and looking at that through our entire lives isn't that much different than what we're already doing. But what do you guys think of Vision OS? Is this a fad or is this the future? Do you think Apple's ever going to kill it off? I mean, I can't really think of a time Apple has introduced an entirely new operating system. They have their air powers from time to time where they launch one product and then it doesn't really go well, so they get rid of it. But something as massive as this, like an entire OS, an entire hardware team in a brand new product category, it's not a modification of an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad. It's its own thing. They just kill it off after a few years due to lack of interest. I don't know. I'm really excited for it now, and I'm kind of wondering if I'm just acting like defensively because I think the tech community has gotten so boring, so stale lately. Smartphones are all incremental and everything is just iterative updates. Okay, M2 Ultra is faster than M1 Ultra a little bit. Great. And then next year we'll get M3. And then after that we'll get M4. And then M5. And then M6. And everyone will be a little bit faster than the one before. Yeah, it's all getting kind of stale and I was losing a lot of interest in the tech space as a whole. But this headset thing has, I guess, kind of sparked a new interest in me because there's flaws with it. Because there's challenges with it. Not because it's perfect, but because it's not there yet. I think that's what kind of excites me about it is unlike the iPhone or the Mac where there's not a huge list of things we can suggest hardware-wise or even software-wise for them to change. But with this, there is a ton of things we're all thinking of now. Oh, they could get better with this. They could improve the outside vision. They could eventually get pass-through displays and they could eventually turn it into glasses and still have the eye tracking and all that. Like, the possibilities have kind of become endless in a way. So maybe I'm biased towards Apple Vision Pro because I feel like if this ain't the future, then Apple's not involved. And that's why most of my heart is going to be in the electric vehicle space because the car stuff is far more exciting, far more revolutionary in my opinion than anything going on in the smartphone or laptop world. So maybe Apple's not interested in the electric vehicle business because one, the margins aren't very good and they think that it's kind of already arrived, like the transition has started. They don't have much unique advantages that they can bring to the EV space, especially with CarPlay being on so many vehicles already. But Apple may think they have something unique and special in the spatial computing market that no one else can offer, and that's more easily translatable because of their silicon and how it's faster and more efficient than anybody else's. And because of Tim Cook's supply chain expertise when it comes to OLED panels and now these micro OLED ones, and the refresh rate and the pixel density and the colors and all of the computational things they've learned from the iPhone with LiDAR and the sensors and gestures with eye tracking and all that. Everything they've learned from the existing ecosystem can kind of translate into this new product category where Apple might feel like there's not much competition that's going to be bumping up against them because they've got the software and they've got the hardware and they've got the supply chain. So I don't know, my interest in the tech community has kind of suddenly all peaked now, and I like that we have time to discuss this. I kind of like that the Vision Pro headset isn't coming out until next year and we don't have all the specs on it now because it's way more interesting in my opinion than anything else going on at Apple. So thank you for listening to my rambles and let me know what you think of Vision Pro down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.